Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with this week in cannabis news from August 8th to the 15th. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And then of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so you can watch episodes over time to learn about how the industry has evolved, and then you can identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up and take advantage whenever you feel ready. And after a phenomenal week of earnings from all the top tier MSOs, share prices have not moved up, but we knew that, okay? And the good news is that the share prices haven't fallen to the level they were last week. That's where Cresco is around $12.50. And so yeah, despite the share prices not moving, we've literally just witnessed the fundamentals get stronger than they were 3 months ago, yet the companies are trading at cheaper valuations than they were 3 months ago. Yeah, it makes no sense. That's what makes this an opportunity. And at the same time, the CEOs of these US MSOs also are very confident that the Safe Banking Act, the next catalyst that we need to give this industry a boost, which will allow US capital to finally invest without fear of federal prosecution, and it will allow these US MSOs to uplist onto major US exchanges like the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. They're very confident that it's 8 months out at the latest, possibly even 6 months out in Q1 of 2022, but we're just going to play this video to relay Boris's answer. So Zach Guzman from Yahoo Finance asks, Cannabis CEO signal confidence on banking law reform. So let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, when you think about, I guess, where the U.S. is, obviously, we've been hearing more and more about that push among progressive Democrats to kind of get that legalization, full legalization bill kind of across the finish line, instituting that at a federal level. When we talk about the other alternatives there, safe banking, we had Senator Cory Booker on the show not too long ago talking about maybe walking back and supporting that as well. I mean, when you look at that, your timeline here, as it drags on, how do you maybe start shifting maybe away from investing in the U.S. to, Europe versus kind of how that dynamic's playing out right now? How do you see it?
I mean, the U.S. market is definitely the place still for growth. It's the most, the most developed market. It's the most, it has the most growth capability. Obviously, if we get safe banking, which I think we will by April of next year, I think they're first going to vote at the end in the fourth quarter, probably on a more comprehensive bill. I don't think that bill will get through, although we'll try to get it through with interstate commerce and rescheduling. I just don't think Republicans are ready for that yet. I do think, though, that we've got the votes in the Republican Party, 60 votes to get safe banking through. And let's be honest, for social equity, which is the big issue for progressives and for Democrats, without safe banking, you're not going to get social equity, right? If people can't open up bank accounts, can't borrow at reasonable rates, and workers can't open up bank accounts or get credit cards, you're never going to be able to get that business up and going. And so we really need safe banking. It's very, very important for the sector, and it's the best thing we can get to get social equity programs up and going. So the U.S. is our primary focus, but I have to think long term, and I can't think over the next 2-3 years. I got to think over the next 5 to 10 years. And there's no question, the European market is twice the size of the U.S. It has a massive culture of cannabis use, and we wanted to make sure we put our foot on the ground in Europe and started to build the operations. So as we get into 23, 24, and 25, the European operations will start to seriously contribute to both the revenue and the bottom line of Curaleaf. But
so I'm going to stop it there, but basically he's one of the main CEOs in the US that believes that Europe is necessary to get into, whereas Kim Rivers from Trulieve actually doesn't believe Europe is as much as a priority because the US has so much growth trajectory in the coming years. She wants to focus on the US. But I just want to show you what Kim believes based on what she was recently interviewed for. So Zach Guzman interviewed her as well. And Kim answered, Rivers, the CEO of Florida-based cannabis giant Trulieve, also reiterated her belief that the Safe Banking Act is likely the first federal reform that will make it across the finish line, and echoed Jordan's timeline of next year. I'm there on safe banking for Q1 of 2022, she said. The votes are there now, so she's echoing Boris Jordan, saying they have the votes. It just has to get brought to the floor. So sadly, this is just a matter of Chuck Schumer bringing it to the floor for a vote. If they don't end up getting what they want to vote on maybe later in the year based on what Boris was saying, we don't necessarily know. But it seems like incremental is more likely than a big change all at once. And realistically, big picture, if you're a long-term investor like me, April 2022 is only like 8 months out. It's not that far away. So now is a great time to accumulate or be patient and just keep stacking up cash. But seems like this is on the horizon, and obviously SAFE is going to be a very big deal. It's a very big catalyst. And I just also want to add that in November, when these MSOs report Q3, the numbers are going to be even stronger. So the lower the share prices go, it just creates a bigger discrepancy for the eventual catalyst that SAFE will be. So it's very interesting. Obviously, though, make your own plan and decide what works for you based on the amount of income you're making and how much you spend every single month. But just try to keep that money invested if you can and accumulate if you can. Onto this, just wanted to highlight this from the JT Burnett case. This is Kim Rivers' husband, and he has been convicted on 5 accounts. But just wanted to bring this up. Trulieve. Do we see Trulieve in here at all? No. So there are a lot of people online freaking out about this, thinking that this is a big deal and that Kim is involved. Kim is not involved whatsoever. So if you're going to waste any energy thinking that, this is going to affect Trulieve, it's a waste, and I recommend you don't. And because our mind and our imagination can typically be our worst enemy, it's very important not to let the fear, uncertainty, and doubt creep in. Because, as we can see, this has nothing to do with Trulieve or Kim Rivers. And although this is her husband, Kim is a trained lawyer, and I imagine she's done everything in her power to protect what she's built and, who she is as a CEO now from her husband's mistakes in the past. 2 completely irrelevant things, so do not let that worry or seep in. Onto this from Todd Harrison. AP at Stifel flagged this, and yes, Jay Schultz did too. The script is the script is the script. He's expecting SAFE Plus at some point, but we're just going to pull this up. A media article pointed to White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki commenting on President Biden exploring the idea of using his executive clemency powers to provide relief for certain nonviolent drug offenders. This is big because this is the first we're hearing about this, and it's because possibly after getting that infrastructure bill, now what is Biden up to do? Hopefully keeping some of his campaign promises. While we believe it remains early in the negotiation and discussion of federal cannabis reform, with Schumer not having formally introduced a bill, we believe the positioning of the White House could provide a glimpse into an avenue for success of the SAFE Act. As we had previously discussed, the social justice measures that Senate Democrats have indicated are required to pass the bipartisan SAFE Act is a difficult topic to thread the needle on, namely with Republicans, although that doesn't seem to be the facts that we're getting from the CEOs. They seem to think the Republicans have the votes for SAFE to pass. It's a comprehensive bill that's very tough to get them on board with, but however, should President Biden use executive actions to achieve adequate social justice needs, the standalone SAFE Act could have a higher probability of passing Congress, in our view. Hence, we remain attentive to White House posturing and any response from the Senate. So this is very interesting to bring up because this is the first that we're hearing of any sort of talk from Biden considering doing this. So this is big. We're just going to have to wait and see. But definitely changes the tone from the White House and their attitude towards cannabis. And then this just covers the same thing. Biden exploring clemency for people with federal drug convictions, White House says. So this is big because this is new. He's looking into using his executive authority to grant clemency to people with certain nonviolent drug convictions, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said on Wednesday. Asked about plans for federal inmates who were released to home confinement during the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic but who still have yet to return behind bars, Psaki said the administration is working hard every day to reform our justice system in order to strengthen families, boost our economy, give people a chance at a better future. Well, this is an easy victory if you want to do that. As part of this, the president is deeply committed to reducing incarceration, helping people successfully re-enter society, and he has said too many people are incarcerated, too many are black and brown, she said, and he is therefore exploring multiple avenues to provide relief to certain nonviolent drug offenders, including through the use of his clemency power. Yeah, especially when you helped create the laws that put all these people in there. Clemency actions that the president could take include commuting the sentences of those who are currently incarcerated or pardoning people whose records impede their abilities to get jobs, vote, or otherwise participate in society. So this is a big deal, and yeah, he's faced a lot of criticism because he's obviously helped create these laws, but this is big because this is the first we're hearing from this. So obviously I will cover these developments as the weeks go on. But if this develops and we hear more about this could make the fall a lot more interesting and add to the momentum and possibly accelerate the change of SAFE or some other sort of reforms incrementally. But we will have to wait and see. On to this news, as Michigan cannabis sales broke another record in July. Love to see it as state data shows. Michigan cannabis sales broke another record last month with more than 171 million in cannabis transactions, according to data from a state regulatory body that was released on Friday. Andrew Dispo, executive director of Michigan's Cannabis Regulatory Agency, touted the 128 million in adult use sales and 43 million in medical cannabis purchases in July, saying, another record month. That's amazing. And the prior month saw 107 million in recreational cannabis sales, up to 128. That is a massive jump. And 42 million from medical cannabis sales, down from 43. But again, if you don't need to go to a doctor and have to go through that just to get flower that helps whatever your ailment is, then most people are just going to go straight to the shop and get the flower that they know does the trick. So for July, the total sales translates into 23 million in tax revenue, some of which will go to infrastructure projects, public education, and individual jurisdictions. So it just goes to show the states that legalize are the leaders in the U.S. going forward. On to this from New Cannabis Ventures. Cannabis sales slowed ahead of the summer. Now, obviously, every month is not going to see a record amount. We would love to see that, but that's not realistic. And we do have to live in reality. So, good to go through these sales, but they're still strong. That's one thing to point out. Western markets, BDSA provides coverage for Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, and Oregon. In April, growth ranged from -3 in Colorado to 29% in Arizona compared to a year ago. Now, Arizona is a unique case because they just legalized for adult use, so that is why we're seeing such a big jump. This accounts for just medical sales. This accounts for medical and adult. And Arizona transitioned to adult use in late January, but this is the third month that BDSA included adult use sales. Total cannabis sales grew to 29% to 117.9 million, with adult use representing 53.7 million, down slightly from May, while medical cannabis sales fell 30% to 64 million. And again, that is because when medical patients can just get flower from a store, it's a lot easier than having to go to a doctor and, spend their time to get just the same thing that you might need. In California, annual sales grew 13.8% to 331 million, down 5% from June and 7% from the record level in April. But nonetheless, this is common. We see the spikes, they come down, they come back up, they come back down. And this will just be the trajectory for California as it seemed to be in the past. Colorado, the mature market of Colorado, which has shown vigorous growth over the past year for a mature market, declined 5% compared to a year ago. Last June, sales had grown 30.4%, so compared to 2 years ago, sales expanded 23.9%, or still 11.3% compound growth in their 7th year of adult use sales. Sequentially, sales dropped 5.3% to 190.5 million. So still very strong, and it also shows if we take a look, it seems like August 2019 was when they saw their record month for that year. July 2020, they saw their record month for this year. So it's totally possible that in August, this month, or September, we will see their record month for 2021. I have no doubt that we're going to see that at some point. But again, for a mature market, great to see that growth is still chugging along. In Nevada, given that Las Vegas fully reopened during June, the 8.8 sequential decline was disappointing. Compared to a year ago, sales expanded by 19.5% in June to 79.7 million. Although that's disappointing, I imagine travel is at like 1/4 of the rate that it was prior to the pandemic. So just as things normalize and people get vaccinated, that should return to normal. Onto Oregon, another mature market that had explosive growth following the pandemic, declined year over year by 1% with sales of 99.3 million following 6% from May. If we take a look at their biggest spike so far in 2021 was from July. We look last year, they set their record in July, so possible that we might see something in the coming months which will provide for Oregon's best month of this year. Then if we turn to Eastern markets though, in the newer markets, the annual rate of growth continued to slow in all markets. Note that we wrote about June data for Illinois based on the state's data a month ago. BDSA provides more comprehensive data than the state, breaking down the product types. The state reported very strong July adult use sales with growth of 110% to a record 127.8 million. So that is not in here. That's not the latest one, but that was what we saw for July. So that's big, and we love to see that out of Illinois. Medical sales should be reported this coming week. And note that BDSA has begun providing data for Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania as of January. Now, they've been saying that, but they haven't provided that. But this is nice to see. Florida sales increased 3% sequentially to a record 155.7 million. And that is a mature medical-only market. Can you imagine when they legalize for adult use? That will be amazing. While Pennsylvania's fell for the second month in a row to 102.7 million. Michigan, which we previously detailed, saw overall sales flat at 149 million, up 65% from a year ago. That's June though, whereas Michigan sales we just saw reached 171 million, so that is a record. Great to see that out of there. Illinois though, combined adult use and medical sales fell by 2% in June, but they jumped up big time in July, which I covered earlier on in the month. So this is just a little bit old, this information. Maryland, this medical market continued to see slower growth with year-over-year growth at just 19%. Sales fell sequentially by 4% to 45 million. Now, Maryland is just a medical market. Hopefully, they can get that adult use one online in the next few years, as there are efforts for them to do that. But this just goes to show that medical only seems steadily growing over time. Imagine when they allow adult use. And then Massachusetts, so the growing store base helped Massachusetts to post solid numbers, with sales expanding 0.6 from May and 79 from a year ago to 132.9 million. And so this was Massachusetts' best month to date. And as we can see, these numbers in the state, at least, as they ease their regulations, they just keep heading up and keep growing. So that's positive to see. So again, although sales slowed a little bit, they're still strong as ever. And we're not going to see records every month. I mean, we'd love to, and we rarely do see that. So the fact that we're seeing this in an industry, almost record sales every single month or every few months, that's still very big and shows how early we are in. And then I just wanted to bring your attention here. This is the Colorado Department of Revenue released monthly cannabis sales and tax and fee revenue figures, but I want to bring your attention down here. To date total, since January 2014, Colorado the first state to legalize adult use, leading the way, with just a small population of 5.7 million people to date in 7 years have brought in $11.1 billion themselves. If we look at the total addressable market of the U.S. right now, like last year was 17.5 billion in sales, and this is what Colorado's done by themselves in 7 years. So just want to show you this because highlighting that we are still in the first inning, but obviously this is leadership because this has accounted for 35 million in tax revenue brought in just in the month of July, and that's 251 million in tax revenue from January to July 2021 that can be reinvested in infrastructure, education, all sorts of things. And to date total, they've brought in 1.8 billion in tax revenue for the state. But if we look at June 2021 sales individually, 184 million, fell a little bit, but still very big for a state of just 5.7 million people. January to June 2021, so far as a mature market, they've already brought in over $1 billion in revenue in sales. So I just want to use this to also show you that Colorado is the 22nd largest population in the U.S. So there are 21 states with populations larger than this. And then guess what? There are only 18 states that have legalized for adult use so far, and only about 12 or 13 have actual adult use regulated markets in play. Some of the new ones like New York and New Jersey haven't even gotten those online yet, same as New Mexico and Virginia. And then we have 32 states still yet to reform their cannabis laws and even consider legalizing for adult use. So just want to remind you, we are in the first inning. There is so much potential to be had. And so if this says anything, if every state managed to do $1 billion, that would make the total addressable market up to $50 billion. Now that's just an example though, because we know California is already doing $4 to $5 billion. We know New York, Texas, Florida, they'll be doing billions in their first year. Arizona, Illinois is already doing $1 billion in their first year. Michigan too. So it's just the potential for the total addressable market to hit 80 billion and 100 billion as long as states legalized for adult use. I think the picture gets clearer and clearer. Just as much as we create legal, accessible markets, we will take away that market share from the black market, and that can create a total addressable market in the U.S. of 80 billion to 100 billion and possibly more. How quickly can we get to the 50 billion addressable market? 2025? What do you think? Let me know in the comments, but just wanted to show this because this is an eye-opener for me and just goes to show the potential of all 50 states once they've reformed and caught up with the times. Then if we move on to the Office of Medical Cannabis Use from Florida, we can see from August 13th, the state of Florida added 2,614 patients to their list of qualified patients, giving them a total of 597,659. So the growth continues there. And if we look at this last week of August 9th to 13th, 2 stores were opened, one from Trulieve and one from Sunnyside, which is Cresco Labs in Fort Lauderdale. So the expansion continues. And then if we just take a look at the companies here, which MSOs in Florida are selling the most milligrams of THC, selling the most milligrams of CBD, and selling the most ounces of smokable flower. If you are invested in any of these companies, definitely take a look and try to compare to last week and the weeks before just to see if they are increasing their market share, selling more, selling less. And as we can see, AltMed Florida, which I believe is Verano, and then Curaleaf are definitely increasing the amount of milligrams sold and smokable ounces, but Trulieve obviously leads the way with the most milligrams sold and over a ton and 4,000 ounces or so of smokable flower. And then just consider that Harvest and Trulieve are going to become one entity. This is going to give Trulieve 99 stores, and they're going to eat up this amount of milligrams of THC, this amount of CBD, and this amount of ounces sold. So Trulieve is still the dominant one in Florida, no doubt, but good to see continued growth there in a very mature medical market. And then this one from Barron's. Cannabis sales are surging. Green Thumb CEO says more Americans are turning to cannabis for wellness. And this is 100% accurate when we're looking at the fundamentals and the sales. As American cannabis firm Green Thumb earlier this week reported positive net income for its 4th straight quarter, CEO Ben Kovler told Barron's the secret to rising sales was simple. American consumers are choosing cannabis for well-being, Kovler said, and that's driving a surge in this industry, not growth. It's a surge. The Chicago-based firm, after the market closed on Wednesday, reported second quarter net income of $22.1 million, notice positive, or positive 10 cents a share. Analysts have been forecasting earnings of 8 cents a share. Sales of $221.9 million were up 14.1% from the first quarter and beat consensus estimates of $207.5 million. Kovler notes that in the U.S., industry-wide second quarter retail sales were $6 billion, implying a $24 billion annualized run rate, which is a big jump from $17.5 billion last year. So yeah, this is what 2021 sales are on pace for. That's incredible. That's a $24 billion industry that we think is easily going to triple, Kovler said. That's wild. That doesn't really happen. Yeah, it doesn't. So I hope this helps you see the opportunity right in front of your eyes. presented by Green Thumb CEO Ben Kovler. On to this one from Cresco Labs, closes new senior secured credit facility with existing lenders. So this is big because Cresco today announces the closing of an agreement with lenders to upsize its senior secured term loan to an aggregate principal amount of $400 million. The senior loan bears interest at a reduced rate of 9.5% per annum with a maturity date of August 12, 2026. The company intends to use the proceeds from the senior loan to retire its existing $200 million credit facility, which was at a higher rate, I imagine. So that's why they're using this to just close that one off. Fund capital expenditures, which are investments into infrastructure that's going to allow you to increase sales in time, and pursue other targeted growth initiatives within the U.S. cannabis sector. The senior loan does not include any equity or convertible components, so it's good. It doesn't dilute or allow for any convertible equity or shares from debt into equity, so it doesn't dilute current shareholders, and the total facility amount is being provided by a syndicate of 5 existing institutional lenders. So keep in mind, lenders are still lending to these cannabis companies, but the majority of them aren't because of the outdated federal law. So it's, kudos to these real MVPs that are lending their money right now and allowing these companies to expand as they must. They see the opportunity where others don't, and they're willing to take the risk where others don't. Today, we've secured funding to capitalize on new growth opportunities, improved our cost of capital without diluting shareholders, love that, simplified our capital structure, and given ourselves enhanced flexibility in a dynamic capital environment, says Charles Bachtel, CEO of Cresco Labs. This agreement to extend and increase our senior loan reflects the unique value proposition that Cresco Labs has demonstrated and the confidence our investors have in our differentiated strategy. So that's great to highlight from Cresco. Onto Verano to open their 36th Move Florida medical cannabis dispensary in downtown Tampa. So West Kennedy is Verano's 36th Florida dispensary and the company's 84th overall. Later this month, Verano plans to open Move Orange City, its 37th Florida staple front. Move Tampa West Kennedy sits on Kennedy Boulevard, a major east-west corridor in downtown Tampa, and essentially located behind high-traffic destinations such as Raymond James Stadium, the Tampa Riverwalk, Sparkman Wharf, and West Shore Plaza shopping and dining. I love how much they go into the data and show you what decision making was behind choosing their locations, as they highlight Tampa is Florida's third largest metro area with a population of over 3.1 million residents and sees approximately 23 million visitors annually. West Kennedy Boulevard has an average daily traffic count of 33,000 cars, according to the Florida Department of Transportation. So just important to highlight, too, that you need to use data to make calculated investment decisions that are going to provide a good return on investment as opposed to a mediocre return on investment. So just showing, though, that, there's a lot more of just picking a store because there's a cheap price for a location. You want to make sure that there's, people flowing through it and enough traffic that's getting to you so that there's actual, reason to believe that you're going to see growth from that location as opposed to just stagnation over time. So just wanted to add that it's the same as investing, right? You just want to use the data to help create a bigger, better, more clear picture as opposed to just taking advice from people. So it's making sure that you develop your understanding and take in that new information and educate yourself. While Air Wellness expands its Florida footprint, opens a dispensary in Ocala, and this will be the 39th, and it is from their offshoot affiliation with Liberty Health Sciences, which they own. The dispensary is located, yada yada, at the address in Florida, P.O. Box 34470 if you still stand physical mail. The nearly 3,000 square foot space sits on one of Central Florida's most highly trafficked roads in a plaza with 50 parking spaces that includes several stores, markets, and restaurants. So again, just very important to highlight that there has to be research into finding out why these locations that they expand in are, going to signal growth as opposed to, sell for a year but then end up being more expensive than what they paid for. LHS Ocala features the company's expanded selection of flower strains as well as its newly launched Origin concentrates and Baked Pete's cookies. So good on Air Wellness, and they will be releasing their earnings next week, so I'll cover a batch of earnings next week too when they come. But on top of that, just great news, because these states could have cannabis and psychedelic legalization on the ballot in 2022. Because cannabis won the election in 2020, cannabis is going to win the election in 2022. Again, we know that. Well, drugs are going to win the election. That was an easier way to summarize it. But just to highlight, here's a breakdown of where cannabis legalization and other drug policy reforms could be decided by voters in 2022, as well as a look at a handful of local efforts that enact cannabis policy changes via municipal ballot initiatives this year. But as we should note, it's more than in 2020. So yes, that means more states are trying to reform, not less. It means they're getting with the program. And I'm not going to read them all because that'll just take so much time, but I'm just going to read the title and pause it if you were in the state and you want to read what they're doing. Arkansas, they are collecting signatures to put adult use on the ballot. California psychedelic activists recently filed a petition for the 2022 ballot to make the state the first in the nation to legalize psilocybin mushrooms for any use. Idaho advocates in Idaho are working to advance separate measures to legalize possession of recreational cannabis and create a system of legal medical cannabis sales. Good job, Idaho. Maryland, love that. Maryland's House Speaker recently pledged that lawmakers will pass legislation to put the question of cannabis legalization before voters as a referendum on the 2022 ballot. She's formed a cannabis working group to assess the best way to structure the reform. Mississippi, no initiatives have been filed for 2022 so far, but advocates say it's possible. A campaign could launch if the legislature fails to enact medical cannabis legalization during a special Senate, because voters in 2020 voted for medical cannabis legalization. But the state Supreme Court shut it down following a legal challenge to the entire ballot system. Pathetic leadership out of the state of Mississippi. So very apologetic for anyone that lives there, but hopefully you can get that medical pass done and move on to adult use in time. Missouri, a group of Missouri cannabis activists recently filed a number of separate initiatives to put cannabis reform on the state's 2022 ballot, a move that comes as other advocacy groups are doing their own work, but I've covered that as well, so good to see that from Missouri. Nebraska cannabis activists are gearing up for a mass-scale campaign to put medical cannabis legalization on the state's 2022 ballot after the legislature failed to pass a bill to enact the reform this session, so great to see that out of Nebraska. North Dakota, after a House-passed bill to legalize cannabis in North Dakota was rejected by the Senate in March, some senators hatched a plan to advance the issue by referring it to voters on the 2022 ballot, so voters can vote yes, and I imagine they all will in every single state. Ohio cannabis activists recently unveiled a new plan to legalize cannabis in the state via the ballot as lawmakers pursue separate reform legislation. On to Oklahoma. Oklahoma advocates are pushing two separate initiatives to legalize cannabis for adult use and overhaul the state's existing medical cannabis program. Great job, Oklahoma. South Dakota, well, I feel bad for them because they voted for cannabis in 2020, and then some politician was like, nah, you don't get to decide. Oh, I thought we lived in a democracy. South Dakota activists recently filed 4 separate legalization measures with the state's Legislative Research Council, the first step towards putting the issue before voters next year if the state Supreme Court upholds the lower court ruling that overturned the legal cannabis measure that voters approved last November. I don't get how that can possibly work, but I would move out of South Dakota if that was the case. Wyoming, that's just me. Wyoming activists are seeking to put separate measures to legalize medical cannabis and decriminalize adult use cannabis before voters next year. Huge coming out of Wyoming. And then these are local reform measures. We've got Ohio, South Carolina, and Texas seeking their own reform measures. So Texas, a newly established Texas progressive group recently unveiled a campaign to put an initiative to decriminalize cannabis possession and ban no-knock warrants on this November's ballot in Austin, while South Carolina, the Ohio-based Sensible Movement Coalition that's actively working to put decriminalization measures before voters in that state is also branching out to bring reform to South Carolina. And in Ohio, 22 jurisdictions have adopted local statutes that reduce the penalty for low-level cannabis possession from misdemeanor punishable by jail time to a fine to the lowest penalty allowed by the state. That is leadership, if you can call it that, because we should not be locking people up for this. And just love to see the progress, because in total, though, that is, especially for reform, the 2022 election, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That could be 12 states, up from 5 in 2020. So just goes to show that this movement is gaining momentum, not losing it. And then lastly, we've got this Cannabis Confidential, Todd Harrison Substack. I just wanted to show you because, again, we have to highlight that the fundamentals were phenomenal. Trulieve brought in $312 million. They beat estimates of $307 million. Verano brought in $199 million, beat estimates of $187.8 million. GTI brought in $229 million, beat estimates of $207 million. Trulieve brought in $215, beat estimates of $207. And Cresco brought in revenues of $210 million, beating their estimates of $193 million. All that to say, I'm being long-term greedy, and I hope you are too, because I have no doubt that this is going to happen and that the next catalyst, SAFE, is on the horizon. But we're just going to recap what Todd has to say because it makes sense, and I'm all about investing in what makes sense to me based on the research I've done, the knowledge I've acquired, the understanding I've developed, and the fundamentals on the ground. Because as brutal as these last 6 months have been, we continue to believe that we're in the eye of the upside storm, and as traders vote in the short term, investors, long-term investors like us, would be wise to view this generational opportunity through a longer-term lens, because the script is the script is the script. What do I mean by that? We've been in the view that, 1, this is a state-led story, which has been an upside surprise since 2021. 2, federal progress will be incremental, a scenario seemingly supported when the White House confirms that it's exploring clemency. So next week, I'll be very happy to report on any developments that brings us for federal drug crimes. The plus, That'll affix to safe later this year, early next year. And 3, this latest malaise is a cyclical bear within a secular bull. For that reason, I'm being long-term greedy, and you should be too, because now's the time to accumulate, or to stack to accumulate, or to just watch the show unfold. Because as I'm trying to show you, and as it's pretty obvious by all these facts that I'm bringing you, cannabis is not going anywhere in the US, and it's just a matter of time for the politicians to catch up to the American people. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think about the stories I mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or let me know what you think. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it. Subscribe if you don't want to miss any future ones, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.